This morning, as we continue our work through the Gospel of Luke, we've gotten to some of the hardest stuff to read. I mean, it's beautiful and wonderful. But if you take it seriously, and if you try and let the story hit you fresh, hit you new, it's some of the hardest stuff. Before we get into it, I just want to ask this question. Have you ever been really, truly, and badly failed by anybody? Someone over here is feeling it. Yeah, Jeremy, you're with me there. You ever have anybody really let you down? How's that feel? You know, I have a big, long story. I'm not going to tell it because, you know, I don't want to talk about somebody else. And they weren't here. Okay, so this is not a person I'm dealing with in church. But I have a person that I run into regularly, you know, from time to time. And, man, they shouted at me, you know, for a while. And, you know, I look back on it and I'm like, okay, well, you know, I understand why they did it. I'd like to be able to say, no, I was totally innocent. This person was just a jerk. No, I had something coming, but I didn't have that coming. And they kind of made a fool out of me and yelled at me for a while, and it stung, and it hurt. And I'm like, dude, why didn't you come talk to me? I'm a nice guy. You know, if I'm hurting you, if I'm letting you down, and especially if I don't know about it, I will work with you. Why did you not? They totally failed me. And granted, I had something to play in it, but they just let the relationship down. The friendship failed. And it hurt. This is several weeks ago, and I still feel the sting of that. I still feel the hurt of that failure. And all they did was talk to me in a way that wasn't real nice. Maybe you've had something worse. A relationship that really comes apart on you. Things that it takes years to get over. Have you ever been there? What do you do with that? Our Lord has been walking toward Jerusalem for a long time in this telling of the gospel. As Luke describes it, from chapter 9 to chapter 19, it's all about the journey there. And the whole way there, he's preparing them for when he gets there. The whole way, he's preparing them. So you'd like to think that when they got there, they'd be ready. You know, it's almost okay even for some of the people to fail him because they've been failing him through the whole journey. As you look at the journey toward Jerusalem, there's a group of people who are hostile to Jesus from the very start of the trip. You know, they're ready to go and they're ready to fight, and so some amount of failure when he gets there is almost expected. But then there are people you wouldn't expect it from. People who are walking on the journey with him, not to fix him or to fight him, but because they want to learn from him. And you'd like to think that by the time they get to that city, they'd kind of be ready. That they wouldn't let him down. But if you think that, you don't know human nature, do you? I don't know. If I think that, I don't know my own nature, do I? Jesus knows what it is to bear the sting of failure. In the passage that we're looking at this morning, there's this whole long list of them. And they're not harsh words. I mean, well, there's some of it that is harsh words, but it's not just harsh words. Let's look at them. The beginning of the great failure of our Lord begins here. The tree was probably a little smaller, but that tree was probably around when it happened. Those things live a long time. In the dark of Gethsemane is where that failure begins. And it's brutal. You remember he goes into Gethsemane and he's bearing this terrible pain. He walks into it and he says, "Stay here and pray for me." Pray that you won't fall into temptation. He goes off and he prays by himself. And then he comes back and he finds absolute failure. When he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and he found them sleeping for sorrow. He realized that he needed them. He didn't tell them to pray for no reason. He was hurting. Remember how hard he prayed? I have never prayed as hard as Jesus did. I have never prayed till I sweat blood. And he needed friends. He needed somebody to care about him. They've been walking with him the whole way. They're on their way there. They ought to be ready for this, but they're totally not. And when he needed friends, they absolutely let him down. While he's talking to them about it, couldn't you just pray? Couldn't you do that for me? While he's talking to them about it, while he was still speaking, there came a crowd, and the man called Judas. Now, who is that guy? It's one of his friends. It's so easy for us to forget that there's a real friendship there. It's so easy because we know what he did to him to think that he was never really anybody's friend. He was always just a fake and a cheat. And he was always as much of a failure as any of them. But he was truly and genuinely a friend. Because only a friend can come close enough to really betray you. Only a friend can get close enough to really cause you the kind of pain that happens here. So the man called Judas, one of the 12, was leading this mob, this crowd that is coming to kill him. He drew near to Jesus and he kissed him. Kissed him. You ever been failed? You ever have somebody let you down? This is not a kiss of friendship. Who knows how many times that they had kissed in greeting? In the culture, a kiss on the cheek is a normal thing to say hello. Greet one another with a holy kiss. Here's Judas doing this same thing that he's done 100 times and received from Jesus in return. But it's to kill him. It's to hurt him. Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? And when those who were around him saw what would follow, and they're looking at the crowd and the writings on the wall, it's obvious what's coming next. When they saw what would follow, they said, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? You remember just a few verses ago, he's been saying, look, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. Arm up. Things are going to be hard now. So maybe that was the time you were talking about. Should we strike with a sword? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. Do you think he was aiming for the ear? He's not doing plastic surgery here. He's not saying, you know what, you would look a lot better as Van Gogh. He's trying to kill. How long has he been walking with this Lord who says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Forgive everything. Take no resentment from whatever's done to you. Don't be a violent person. All the while he's been walking with this man, and that seems like a good idea. Have you ever felt absolutely failed? And just think about what Jesus has got to be experiencing here. What have I been teaching you? And you think this is what I want. Have you ever been failed? And then Jesus said to the crowd, said to the chief priests and the officers of the temple and the elders who had come out against him, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs? These at least are not his friends. But who is this man? And the very next thing is, I've been sitting in the temple. I've been teaching. And what has he been teaching? What does he teach? Love one another. For literally over 1,000, over 15, nearly 2,000 years, God has been working with this people group to teach steadfast love and faithfulness. And here they are, the leaders of His people. He's the king of these people. Can this feel like success? Who am I? You know better than this. They have absolutely let Him down. His nation has completely failed Him. His friends completely fail Him. And none of it's fair. Have you ever been failed? Peter, who so proudly boasted, even if I have to go into trial and arrest, and even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you. Surrounded by the mob, and there's no power anymore. Everyone has run away and turned tail. And here's Peter following, and he sees them, and they're like, wait a minute, you're one of them? No, I'm not. You're one of them? No, I'm not. You're one of them because you're a Galilean. But Peter said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter, which means he's close enough to him to hear him. If he ever needed a friend, it was then. If he ever needed someone to stand by his side and say, wait a minute, this isn't okay. You've got the wrong guy. I know him. I've been walking with him. He hasn't done any of the things you're accusing him of. He needed somebody to testify. Somebody to be a witness. And instead of that, he gets, man, I don't know what you're talking about. Leave me alone. No, I don't know him. He hears it all, and he turns and he looks at him. Ugh. You ever have anybody just let you down? Now, the men who were holding Jesus in custody were mocking him as they beat him. And they also blindfolded him. They kept asking, prophesy, who is it that struck you? And they said many other things against him, blaspheming him. Again, his nation. This is police brutality. You know? What has he been charged with? Nothing yet. They haven't held court yet. Can you imagine standing in an unfriendly crowd and having your eyes taken away? And then the fist comes. You have no way to prepare yourself for it. No way to get ready. You know, and your mouth is full of blood all of a sudden. Pain probably takes a second or two before it arrives. Somebody says something to me that's not nice, and I sting about it for weeks. Can you imagine? Have you ever been failed? When day came, they assembled the elders of the people, and they gathered together both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to the council, and they said, if you are the Christ, tell us. You know, because this is going to be a fair trial after last night. This thing's a kangaroo court. The verdict's already set when he walks in the door. They're going through the process just to get through the process so that they can feel better about it, maybe? So they can maintain some semblance of justice for the nation, so that they can look fair. Jesus is a dead man at this point. Can you imagine standing there as king? This is what he is. Descendant of David. The one who ought to be an authority figure in that place. The one who is God himself in that place. Standing there, looking at these people, going, who are you? Why are your hearts like this? How long have you walked with me? All your lives you have been worshiping God, burning incense, burning animals to work out your sin. Why are you like this? Have you ever seen absolute failure? Have you ever been there? Have you? And every last one of these. It's not like Jesus faced a failure. Every last one of these. Jesus got every right to expect better of these people. Both friend and foe alike. He had every right, because these are all, quote-unquote, faithful Jews. Faithful people of God. He had every right to expect better. They're all failures. And have you ever been failed? What does that feel like? Before I move on, just want to make this point. Jesus has solidarity with you when you face the disappointments and the failures of this world. He knows what it's like. He's never far away from you. But when you carry a pain because somebody has let you down and been less than what you expected, you have a friend sitting beside you who goes, yeah, tell me about it. Man, I know. That hurts, doesn't it? I've been there. Let me tell you about a 12-hour period. And it went on and on and on. It's like everybody around me let me down, so I know what you're going through. I've been there with you. Have you ever been truly failed by someone? But you know what? I started with that question because it's the easier one to ask. It's hard to get hurt by someone else, isn't it? But have you ever truly failed? I look at that list of people and I find myself in too many of those places. The cowardice of Peter, I've felt it. When I knew I should have said something and wouldn't, or I was afraid, I've been there. The times when somebody draws a sword and cuts off somebody's ear. That person I talked about who shouted at me, do you know what I want to do? I just want to end the relationship. I just want to be like, I am done with you. You're not even part of my church, so I don't have to stay friends with you. One of you treats me that way, I got to deal with you. No. If I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ, I have to love everybody. I don't get to treat anybody that way. That's pulling a sword on somebody when Jesus has called me to be a man of peace. But that's what I want to do. When someone fails me, I want to fail. I want to fail in return. I want to build up hate. I want to be angry and have angst and lash out. I want to be just as nasty to them as they were to me. I want to win. I want to triumph. I want to be really ugly. Except in my purest heart of hearts, I know I want to be something else. I don't want to be a failure. This Christian walk that we're doing, I want to be able to face the failures of people in this world with love. I want to be able to be good when others are bad. I want to be able to be kind when people let me down. I want to be like, well, there's somebody I admire in all of this, isn't there? When you have a diamond, you set it on a black piece of felt so that you can really see it. Right? You let the light shine into it, and its refraction becomes obvious on that black cloth. And that's what we have here. All that failure is black velvet, or maybe black thorns, I don't know. But sitting on it is an absolute diamond. In absolute contrast to all of them, Jesus remains completely balanced through all of this. He is such an admirable man. As he passes through failure, and think about it, have you ever been failed? What kind of emotions does that stir in you? Don't you self-justify your bad behavior? Don't you let your anger go because you've been let down? Maybe even your anger at God. And you're like, well, it's reasonable because look at what just happened. Look at Him. Fix your eyes on Him and look at who He is in all of this. because he is absolutely beautiful. Why does he say this to Judas? Judas, what are you doing? You realize that? This is not Judas, you jerk. This is Judas. Oh, you're not gonna. But you need to wake up. You need to take a hard look at what you're doing right now, because this is not what I made you to be. And isn't that what he does to you and to me when we behave badly? When we let him down, when we let one another down, when we lash out at the world around us, doesn't he call us by name and say, what are you doing? I have called you to so much better than this. Judas, wake up. Ethan, wake up. Christian, wake up. You've walked with me, you know better. Come on. Come back to me. What are you doing? Now, how easy would it be for him to lash out at Judas here? Judas, you're killing me. And that's not, you're killing me here. That's, you are killing me. No. His heart and his concern is for Judas. Judas Iscariot. Judas, his betrayer. Or when the sword comes flying through the air, no more of this. And he touched his ear and he healed him. His disciples may have forgotten who they were. He hasn't forgotten who he is. He knows precisely what he is to be about. In the midst of the violence, with all of their swords, they've come after him, and the violence comes flying from his side of things, and he says, no! No, you will not harbor that in who you are. Put it away. And be a person of healing. It's who he is. It's what he does. His enemy is there to kill him. And he heals his enemy. Do you see how centered he is? He knows precisely who he is and what he's about. And that's got to be a conscious decision. That doesn't happen by accident. That comes from his character. That comes from who he is. Is no, I reject violence and I embrace love. I'm going to be who I want to be, not who you're going to try and make me be. Or, when I was with you, day after day in the temple, you didn't lay hands on me. I was there. I was defenseless. You could have arrested me at any time. No, you come now because this is your hour. This is the power of darkness. Again, why would he say that? Is he gloating? It's a wake-up call. Some of the very people who are doing this right now may become Christians later because he said this. Remember, the crowd that cries for his blood is the crowd that is pricked to the heart and says, brothers, what shall we do? When Peter preaches to them. Some of those people may have been there in the arrest. He wants them saved. And he's telling them, what you are doing is darkness. His concern is for them. For his accusers. He knows where he's going and he knows it's the way of the cross. What a centered man he is. He knows exactly where to put his heart. He knows exactly who he is. And he's going to do the godly thing. He's an amazing man. Why do you think he did that? To turn and look at Peter. There's going to be a point where he's going to have to tell Peter, I don't hate you, but I know. I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. You and I both know. But I was there, I saw it, and so I can heal it. I can take care of this. I'm sure Peter experienced Jesus as accusatory, but I do not believe for a moment that Jesus is. Jesus is looking at him to go, yeah, we both know, so that when Jesus needs to deal with it after the resurrection, he's ready to do it. I didn't cut you off, Peter. You ran from me. You ran away and wept bitterly, but I didn't. I turned and stayed with you when you were running from me. So that we could know that's what he does with us. Have you ever felt the sudden awareness that God is looking at me right now in my failure? Probing into my heart? He sees what I am and what I've done. At the most betrayed moments, He doesn't hate. Even there, He loves. Because it's who He is. And He knows who He is. I tell you, if I tell you, you will not believe me. They've asked, are you the Christ? Tell us. Look, if I tell you, you'll not believe. And if I ask, you'll not answer. Why does He say a thing like that? He's saying to them, you are so closed off, so trapped in this, that even if I tried to work with you, you wouldn't let me. But why even say that? Why do this? It's meant to be a therapeutic word. Wake up! Of course they won't. And He knows they won't. That's why He says this. But He's confronting the fact that they won't. He doesn't pretend that failure doesn't happen. He just doesn't hate in response to it. And He says, your failure isn't going to overcome me, but from now on the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. Starting now, you're going to nail me to the cross and you think you're going to be getting rid of me? I'm going to be right there with God. Do your worst, because I know who I am. Yeah, I don't have a slide for this, but all of this flowed out of the garden. It all began in the garden. How was He able to be so centered and so successful? Well, by the time all this came, He'd already dealt with it all. Because He dealt with it when He prayed. When He turned to God. The human being, Jesus Christ, prepared for all of these failures by being with God and saying, please, I don't want to do this, but I want to do your will. He did His Father's will. In the face of every single failure, He had been with God, He was with God, He is forever with God, and He is calling to you, Christian, be with God. Don't respond to failure with failure. Be like Him. Is He not amazing? He is absolutely obedient to His own teachings. You realize that? He is totally consistent with everything that He says. And He calls to you to be consistent with them as well. In the times where things fall apart, you're tempted to fall apart too. But He shows us that we don't have to. He shows us the way of faithfulness in the midst of failure. And it can happen. You can love in response to hate. You can be peaceful in response to violence. You can be kind in response to mistreatment. How do I know? Because He did it and He's leading us there. It's what His teachings lead us to and it's what His example leads us to. You can have that heart because He can give it to you. Because He's got it to give. So you walk with Him. Now just a couple of lessons and we'll be done. Just a couple of things to think on in all of this. And the first thing is that Jesus is acquainted with failure. You can't surprise Him. You can't do such a big mess up that He'll look at you and go, oh, no. Wow, I was ready to work with a lot of stuff, but you are a phenomenal screw-up. I can't do anything with that. That is absolutely not the case. No matter how badly you've bungled things, no matter what a mess you've made of your life, He can work with you. And He will. He absolutely will. If He can walk through that 12-hour period without hate building up in His heart, then He doesn't hate you either. And He wants to work to redeem you. Now, He'll look right at you. He will. And He'll look right at what you don't want Him looking at. He'll do it. But it's to heal you, not to hate you. You cannot surprise this man. He's been through worse than anything you can throw at Him. Jesus heals failures. Anytime you wonder, remember Peter. Okay? No matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, no matter what you're doing right now, He can redeem you and wants to. And He will face what you don't want to face. He'll face it with you to change you. He can transform who you are. This man is solid enough to do it. He's trustworthy. You can walk with Him out of failure and into life again. You can do it. Because He's a healer of people who fail. The only failures in this story that are permanent are those people who cling to them. Judas tied himself to failure. He tied himself by the neck. His failure was permanent because he couldn't trust that someone could deal with what he had done. He couldn't deal with what he had done, and he didn't think anybody else could either. He was wrong. He was absolutely wrong. The chief priests lived in rebellion, and as you read to the end of the book of Acts, they have become murderers twice over. They kill Jesus, and they work hard to conspire to get Him dead, and then they want to kill His apostle as well. And look at who they are in Jerusalem at the end of the book of Acts with Paul. Nasty, horrible people who will put themselves under a death sentence. I'm not going to eat bread till he's dead. They are a mess because they tied themselves. They rejected God's love. They rejected the healing that can be found in Jesus Christ, the resurrected Lord, who triumphs over failure. And you can do it too if you want. If you want to let your failure define you, you can do that. Or you can let Him define you. But He will redefine you. He will take you through failure into holiness. Are you willing to let Him do it? The person on whom you should fix your eyes in this story is the one who does not fail. It is so easy to see all the failures and to become kind of fixated on them because they resonate with my heart. Don't they resonate with yours? And yet the true beauty in the picture is Jesus Christ, who is so phenomenally amazing through it all. Every step of the way, He is a beautiful, godly man. He does the good and right and righteous thing. He cares about others who are actively filled with spittle and hate, who want His death, who are there to bring it about, and He cares for them. Fix your eyes on that. If you want to deal with the failure of your life, if you want to know how to respond to other people's failure, if you want to deal with your own, fix your eyes on Jesus. He can lead you home. That's the place to set your eyes. And Jesus actually expects us to do those hard things that He talked about. And I say that because He did them. You know, when He says, pray for your enemies, what is He doing? When He says, love your enemies, what is He doing? When He cares for Judas, what is He doing? When He cares about the people arresting Him, what is He doing? He's doing what He taught, and He wants you to do it too. It is so easy not to. When somebody actually, it's easy to love a theoretical enemy, it's hard to love a real one. Jesus loved His real enemies who are trying to kill them, and He expects us to do it too. Because most of the time our enemies aren't trying to kill us, they just say mean things. What has been your experience with failure? I'll tell you what my experience has been. That, you know, the person who let me down that I opened up this sermon talking about, I've been actively trying. Well, it's harder to talk about it than I thought. I've been actively trying not to hate them. And the way that I'm doing that is that I'm looking at their complaint and I'm saying, what can I do about it? How can I change what I've done that let them down so that they don't experience that anymore? Now, honestly, they don't deserve that. The way they treated me, I want to be worse. I want to take that problem and multiply it. That's what I want to do. It's not what Jesus has called me to. And so I'm actively working hard to try to alleviate their complaint. Change my life so that they'll be experienced better. It's not even something I care about. But they care about it. Why would I do it? Because Jesus did it. It is so much easier to fail when someone fails you. And it is so much easier to live as a failure than to live as a disciple. But Jesus has called us to better things than these. What has been your experience with failure? When someone lets you down, how do you respond? And when you fail, where do you turn? If you look into your own heart today and you know, man, I've been a jerk. I need to change. Or it may be that you came here with a burden of somebody who's let you down and you need the prayers of God's people to get through it. Well, we'll pray for you. It may be that you came here this morning and nothing I've said has really touched on anything that you've been dealing with, but you're dealing with something hard. Well, this church wants to pray for you. We will. Let us know. And if you're not a Christian, isn't he a great guy? I mean, isn't he an absolutely amazing man? There's no better way of life than following Christ Jesus our Lord. So if you're not a Christian, start following him today. If this morning you're subject to the invitation of God, there's room right here. Why don't you come while we stand and sing?